Nice. Well, good to see everybody. Welcome to this session of the Compost Academy and Sustainable Design Masterclass. We've got a fantastic, amazing professional guest here today, Tony Terusa, joining us. My name is Raleigh Latham, joined here by Keisha and Casey Ertz of Catalyst Bioamendments and Soil Matters, and Brian Vagg of Soil Matters. So it's great to have everybody here today. It's a bit more intimate session than the last few. And we're going to hear about a case study that's been, what, a decade in the making. So this is
Well,
going to be really exciting.
not
I'll
quite a
let
decade,
you,
but it's a 2 year study for
oh,
sure.
geez,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Well,
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you issue it, but quick housekeeping before we get started. Of course, this is being recording, so if for some reason you can't attend the whole thing, don't worry about it. Ideally, you want to be present for this, but you also will get a replay as part of this webinar. Check your link because some people, for some reason, are getting their Compost Academy email sent to their junk box. So check everything. So you'll get a replay link after this with all the resources that we talked about, all the links to everybody's businesses. And for Q&As, make sure if you have a question, answer it in the Q&A box instead of the chat, because that way it's easier for us to keep a record of everything and make sure you get your questions answered. We'll be able to answer some things in the background, but generally we're going to have Q&A at the end of Tony's presentation. We're going to have Tony's presentation, uh, little pitch about the Compost Academy, and then we're going to go into Q&A. But we'll be able to answer that in the background. And if you're already part of the Pioneer program, you can always raise your hand, and you guys get your questions answered first. So great to have everybody here. Brian, why don't you introduce Tony, and we will take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Raleigh. So, yeah, I'd like to introduce Tony Terusa from Irvine Company. He's a senior director of landscaping there. And I've known Tony for a little over 3 years, and we've been working together on some really awesome projects down in Southern California. And our presentation today is really going to be talking about Tony's journey, but then also getting into a study that we just concluded, and we'll go through the results and kind of talk about what the future stands for landscaping, in particular in Southern California, with a focus on soil biology. So Tony, take it away.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I don't use Zoom too much. I'm kind of like a Google Meet guy. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this all works
Hope for
out
the best.
I think it'll
fine.
work just fine. There we go.
There you
Perfect.
go.
You guys
Nice.
all see that?
Yeah,
Yeah, fantastic.
I'm gonna spotlight Tony, so it'll stick on him for a bit. Spotlight for everybody. So everyone, let me know if you can see and hear Tony's presentation. All right, I can see it, but just give me some yeses there.
Hello. Yes. Testing 1, 2.
Yes. Okay, everybody, so you're good to go. Thanks, Tony.
All right. All right. Well, like I said, I'm really excited to be here. Brian's been great to work with. He's been a real godsend on just helping me along in my journey. And I've gotten to know Keisha and Casey over the years as well, use their great product. So let me just go right into it. I work for a company called the Irvine Company, and I'm in landscape management. And this is actually one of my properties, Crystal Cove down in Newport Beach. And we're going to talk about a little study on soil health in my operations. So let's see here. All right, this is me. My title is Senior Director of Landscape. So everything, kind of as boring as making sure the weeds are gone to, big projects, planting large oak trees and stuff. That's what I do. I've studied horticulture, and I've also studied through the soil food web school and became one of their consultants. So a little bit about me. This is, I want to give you kind of an overview on my world. This is a kind of an overview shot of Irvine, California. All these type of, I'm in ornamental horticulture. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are in agriculture, and maybe some of you are in landscape, but this is kind of where I reside and what we need to do. It's basically making sure that these, high ditch areas are always, the trees are always looking as great as they can and pleasing to the eye. Here's Newport Beach, California, just down the street. Some of my properties are in this shot as well. So this is my work field.
Hey, Tony, I have to say that those pictures are fantastic because they do show the scope of how much landscaping there actually is in an urban setting. So yeah, thanks for sharing those kind of drone shots.
Yeah. We often tend to forget, how many trees and swaths of grass and shrubs are line streets and are in properties until you get up in the air, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so a little bit of metrics on my portfolio. I manage 42 retail properties as shopping centers, basically. And I've got 208 acres of irrigated landscape that I'm responsible for, me and my team. That's just shy of 16,000 trees, or no, 17,000 trees. About just a little over 100 tree species across my portfolio. And we've estimated about 1.7 million plants. That's a big guesstimate, but I wanted to throw that out there just for fun. So stewardship is a pillar that the Irvine company kind of stakes its claim in. We're stewards of the land. This picture right here is a picture of what we call the Irvine Ranch. So this goes all the way to the foothills up in Orange, California, Cleveland National Forest, all the way down past Newport Beach to the Pacific Coast or the Pacific Ocean. So most of our properties reside in this area, and stewardship is really important to us because the company holds their properties in perpetuity, meaning we don't just buy properties and flip them and do a quick Band-Aid on them. We want them to get better with time, and that includes our landscape. So this is kind of it's in the culture of what we do, and I think about it a lot, because I'm in landscape. And so we, in landscape, there's a lot of, we use a lot of insecticides, pesticides, synthetic fertilizers is what we're taught in school. But there was a turning point where I'll tell you a quick story about mine, and it involves this book. I'm sure a lot of you, give us a shout out if you've read this one. I sat with a colleague about 10, 11 years ago, and he was telling me about a soil product that he had. And he mentioned to me, like, yeah, you need to start thinking about the soil, because you can't always rely on those harsh chemical fertilizers. And to be real honest, I was kind of offended, because I was like, what's harsh about these fertilizers? It's exactly what they taught us in school. It's nourishment, at least what I believed at the time. He handed me this book and said, you know what? I can't explain it. Just if you want to give it a read, go for it. I read it. By the second chapter, I was like, mind blown. Like, why weren't we ever taught this in school? So I really started to think, geez, what am I going to do? Once you know the information and once what are you going to do with it? So it was a turning point for me. So we started small. I thought about my responsibility over the landscape that I manage in these very aesthetically pleasing environments. And so we came up with a purpose statement. So our team holds to the purpose of creating beautiful landscapes while protecting and preserving the environment. And so creating that purpose statement means you got to have action behind it. So what do we do with that? So I'll take you through a few things. You guys have probably heard about regenerative agriculture. We're in horticulture, and our yield is not a crop that gives fruit or vegetables or anything like that. Our yield is optics. It's the eyes. So whatever we do, we want to practice horticulture, cultivating and managing with a focus on restoration and regrowth. Same concept as regenerative agriculture, but in the landscape industry. A few things that we do that's regenerative is we hold true to trying to get recycled water to any property that we can. Now that's big investments to get it to a property, because it's large pipes under streets to from the municipal districts. But we have been able to achieve about 74% of our shopping centers use recycled water. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically water that's used twice. So it's water, don't want to be crass, but going down the toilet or your sink, it's captured, it's treated, and it goes back and feeds waters our landscapes. 26% is potable. That's safe for consumption, but it's only used once, not very regenerative. So we still got some work to do over there. And then speaking of fertilizers, delivery methods are very important, obviously. So we decided to transfer all of our fertilizing, moving away from granulars to soluble fertigation. We had to start off with synthetics because we had to, kind of wean our soils off, but we eventually moved all the way over to organics. So rather than having quick results and long-term loss with synthetic fertilizers, we're 100% organic. And that's, to us, it's a big win to be 100% there with long-term gains, feeding our soil and ecosystems. A few other things that we do mindfully is, again, everything that we do, we can't achieve 100%, but we try to make, small and big steps along the way. We've converted to electric equipment so that it's better for air pollution and noise pollution, organic fertilizers. About 7 years ago, I decided I got to get rid of Roundup. And I have a lot of colleagues say there's no way you're going to be able to do that. It's going to cost you millions. And we did it. And we hardly saw a blip. So we got rid of that. And we're also about 80% using organic pesticides that are safe for ecosystems and pollinators and everything where we can. And so kind of moving towards what we're going to talk about this case study in a second, but water conservation, I think I saw a San Diego person there, a couple of people from California. You guys know that in Southern California, especially, we're always concerned about conserving water. And we always have, especially in the landscape industry, we have drought on the mind. So Southern California is definitely synonymous with drought. We built, urban sprawls on top of a desert. So, it's a problem that we've created and we have to be very cognizant of it. So I've been in about, many, maybe 100 different water conservation and drought meetings in my career over the last 20 years. And sometimes or most of the time, when we talk about investing in trying to save water, the conversation almost 100% of the time goes right to technology, smart controllers, delivery methods such as drip irrigation or the next fanciest spray nozzle or sprinkler head or anything, master valves, soil moisture sensors. That's all great. I'm a huge proponent of that. I think that's wonderful. But the one thing that, why we're here today and, what we're going to talk about is there's never talk about the soils when it comes to water conservation. I mean, I've never been in a drought meeting where it's like, hey, well, let's make our soils more healthy. So it's, we have more resilient plants. So as most of you know, it's the medium for all of our trees and plants. It's where the rhizosphere and the roots live, stabilizes our root system. And what I believe is, I think correct soil management is the next frontier of water conservation. And we hope to make more strides in the coming years down here in Southern California. Just to put a guesstimated number to it, just a couple pictures of a couple properties that I own, or not own. I wish I owned them. I manage. It's worth about $600 million for just the landscape portion of what's been invested. And so I thought long and hard about this, and it was, talking about drought, there's a lot of legislation that goes around, turf grass is kind of the enemy of the state right now. And I kind of agree with that because it's the thirstiest plant. But the last thing that we want to get caught with is legislation beginning to tell us to reduce the amount of plant material that we've already planted in the ground and invested in. So the reason why we're here today is because we asked this question: if we improve soil health, can we effectively reduce water or water use, right? And so that's where we come into where me and Brian worked on a project over the last 2 years at this center, Alton Retail Center. So this is my smallest property. It's on a corner of Irvine, California. It's about a half acre of irrigated landscape. It's nothing really special. It's just kind of your typical corner shop with a 7-Eleven and a bagel shop and a tuxedo place and a coffee place over there in the corner where the umbrellas are. And we decided, hey, this is a great area where we can study. It's not sexy. It's not like a blinged out place, but it's real. So we decided for over 2 years, let's keep the existing landscape. Let's not go with like drought tolerant things. Let's not rip out landscapes and add compost. Let's just make treatments, test the soil, and reduce water incrementally as we read the bio assessments that Brian provided for us. So what did we do? We added compost one time a year at the beginning of June. So over the 2 years, we did 2 applications in June. It started back in June of 22, and we did another application in 23. Now, this was simply put, remove the mulch away, put a biocomplete compost that we tested and we know has good microorganisms, put it right on top, cover it back up with mulch so that it's the compost and the biology is protected. And then quarterly, we would add compost extract applications about 8 times a year. There's my good friend Brian adding it. He's
hard at work, right?
Hard at work.
Or hardly working. Not sure. Some days.
No. And then 10 days after collecting, or 10 days after application, we would collect soil, send them off to Brian, and he would do his testing. We also tested for a lot of other things. I'll get down to that. Irrigation reduction. If you guys aren't familiar with how landscape management, the operations of that, for years now, for decades, we've relied on smart water controllers, which are ET based. Evapotranspiration is an algorithm that basically reads what kind of plants you have, weather conditions, wind, sun exposure, the type of soil, slope, root depth, all that. And the controllers tell you how much water you should be putting down, even like, the type of sprinklers you have, right? So what we did is we locked down the valves that we treated and didn't treat, the control in the test, so that nobody can touch them. And we reduced them down by percentage. So simply put, if these shrubs were, if the controller wanted to give them 10 minutes of water and we reduced by 10%, it would give it 9 minutes of water. Okay, so what we did not do, the last thing that I wanted to do, and what nobody should want to do, is cheat. That would have proved nothing, and it wouldn't have made me fall asleep at night comfortably. So we did not fertilize at all any of the control or the test, the treatment areas, and we did not cheat the scientific process. So there was no fudging of numbers. There was no, let's just, nobody, there wasn't like an auditor looking at us, checking our work. But at the end of the day, we did what we had to do with integrity so that we can sit here comfortably with you and tell our results.
And Tony, that was one of the things, early on was you wanted to have a lot of transparency, especially to the people you report to and your colleagues, right? So It was very important to make sure, hey, this is a real defensible, honest kind of approach, and looking at it and saying, the data is going to be what it's going to be. And is it going to show that we can do this or can't do it? Because this is really going to help guide direction for Irvine Company for the long term, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing you want is, if it wasn't done right or without integrity, they're going to want to implement it later. And then if it doesn't work when you roll it out, you're going to look even worse. Okay, so what did we test? We tested a lot of things, and most of this stuff we can't go over. There was DNA analysis and sap and leaf tissue analysis, but we looked at everything from soil organic matter, chemistry, nutrition, water holding capacity, aggregation. And a lot of what we'll cover today is soil biology. The big players: fungi, bacteria, protozoa, like I said, DNA and enzymes. I mentioned before that our yield in ornamental horticulture is our eyes, right? We're not measuring bushels of tomatoes or ears of corn. We are measuring, why I'm, if break down what I do in a simple sentence is these landscapes got to look good. And that's what really everybody cares about when they come to these shopping center. And there's no data on that. That's literally just pictures that we can kind of like guide. So it's another thing that we measured, but it was, I don't have data for you, but we'll show you slides on the outcomes.
And, it's an interesting point because I think, in agriculture, it's not so subjective. Typically, you have very measurable types of things. And that's a challenge, I think, in the landscape world, which is the metrics are different and a little bit more subjective. Aesthetics, how do you measure that necessarily besides just that looks good or doesn't look good, or I'm seeing differences, that are occurring.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the challenge that you have with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there's anybody out there in landscape, I've been in many webinars and, sat through Elaine's, schooling and stuff. And most of it, we talk about agriculture, which is really, really needed. I love it. But landscape management and horticulture is a breeding ground for fostering a lot of synthetic use because we want quick results, right? So, we had to step out on the limb, on a limb to kind of do these type of things. So, collaboration and anybody out there wanting to forge forward in the world of horticulture, I'm a strong proponent of. Okay, so this is the map of our shopping center and where we did our testing, our treatments, and our controls. So if you notice, there are 4 treatment areas and 4 control areas, and we really tried our hardest to make sure that if it's a treatment area, we wanted to have a very similar crop or plant material that was its counterpart as the control. So if you see like on the top here, we have a treatment turf area and we have a treatment or a control turf area. Palm, pines, camphor trees. There are other plant materials at the base of those trees, but they're similar in both areas. So that was a big focus of ours. Also, if you notice, I picked a couple of the ones I picked most notably right here. Can you guys see Brian, can you see my?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
moving.
we can see it.
Yep.
Okay. The treatment camphor area, this is right in the middle of a parking lot. So it's, heat island, people walk through it. It's I wanted to make sure that we treated the more harshly treated areas, so that we're not, again, cheating the system. A couple of pictures of our compost application. We raked it in on the turf. And again, like I said, at the base of the pine trees and the ligustrum, put down the compost and then put down a nice layer of mulch to protect it. There's Brian again, working hard. And we would do compost extract applications 4 times a year. Okay, now our results.
Drum roll, please.
What's that? Yeah, drum roll.
Drum roll, please.
Okay, so let's start with our biology. Bacteria decreased by 64% in treatment and decreased by 54% in the control. As a lot of you know, our bacterial levels were, when we started on our baseline, was elevated way too high. So to have a decrease was very good. And it outcompeted in the treatment versus the control. Fungi increased by 250% in treatment, and it increased by 200% in the control. Now, this is an average with all of those zones. And I know what you're thinking. How did it increase by 200% in the control? We will get there. Our F to B, our fungal to bacterial ratio, improved from 0.4 to 1.8 on average in the treatment and 0.2 to 1.3 in the control. I know you guys are seeing a theme here. We did not treat the control, I promise. Most notably, our protozoa increased by 840% on average in the treatment. And as opposed to 85% in control. That's where we saw the biggest kind of like pull away. Okay, so well, let's stay here for a second. I'm going to talk about what we learned and where Brian can attest to this. Every time we got our soil analysis back and we'd get online and we'd talk, I was literally like beating my head against the wall. Like I was waiting for this really obvious, like, pull away from our treatment to the control, but the control kept like, I don't know. How do you
It
put
was
it?
pacing. It was pacing. That was the thing. And we were both going, wow, I expect to see some, but I didn't expect to see the amount of increase in the biology in the control side of the house. And that was a perplexing thing. And the other really fascinating, the data you're seeing right here was around the microbial assessments. But we also had DNA analysis that actually mirrored very, very similar in the same thing. We not only saw an increase in, biomass of genetic material, but we also saw the increase in diversity. And it was the same increases that we were seeing in the treatment that we were seeing in the control. Just the control was less than the treatment in total percentage wise.
Yep.
Do we want to talk about transference now?
Yeah. That's why I brought the map back up. Go ahead, man.
Sure. So this, when you look at this, we've run a lot of trials and I've seen transference before. And what I mean by transference is this, that, microorganisms are modal, not in the sense that they're going to, bacteria is going to hop across the soil and end up in this other location. It's that they taxi cab on the insects and the birds, the amphibians that are all living in this particular area, but then also all the humans, everybody who walks through here, the landscapers who are managing all their tools. And so we knew transference was going to be a thing, but we didn't really think it was going to be that big of an impact. And there's a couple thoughts I think when you come to this. You look at the treatment camphor, the one that's kind of in the left-hand side, middle left. It's surrounded by asphalt. There's just a massive amount of asphalt around there, right? It's not like the biology just said, I'm a nematode. I'm going to swim across this asphalt and end up in this other area. It had to be moved. And when it did move, it found a receptacle home to be able to start, inoculating the soil that was there. And I think also, we were reduced or eliminated fertilizers from the equation as well. So when the biology moved into these new areas, there was not a lot of things that would potentially were moving it backwards, and the plants were readily there to accept, hey, these organisms are here, they're going to help me out. So the level of transference was kind of a mind blower for us. We were like, wow, that is pretty cool that actually worked. It made a weird sense when we're looking at the data because we're like, wow, we should see a bigger difference between the treatment and control, but it was like they're all improving. The treatment's improving and the control's improving from a microbiology standpoint.
Yeah, Brian and Jason, who was another scientist that was working alongside of us throughout the process, had to talk me off the ledge. Like every time we met, I was like, okay, geez, like, why is this happening? So it wasn't until like, I don't know, maybe like after like a year and a half, it's like, okay, there's something to this,
Right.
it's got to be, so transference is a real thing.
Yep.
We also were tracking soil and plant nutrition. There was a lot of this, and just to hit some of the high points, NPK, no difference between treatment and control. Calcium was marginally higher in our treatment areas. Micronutrients, no difference. But we do have to remember, like Brian mentioned, there was no fertilizer used for 2 years. In fact, there still hasn't been for 2.5 years at this site. And there's also an irrigation factor, which I'll hit right now.
Hey, Tony, there was a question that kind of came in. I want to address it right now, which was, was the before and after testing done the same time of year? This was a 2-year-long study. So the big differences you're seeing is from the baseline, from when we started to the end of the project, but we were taking measurements every quarter. So every 3 months, we were taking measurements of that data. So it went through all the seasons, through winter, spring, fall, and summer. And so the data reflects all that. And we did see differences seasonally, as spring obviously tended to push the biology harder and faster. By the time we got into late summer, things were starting to go dormant and slow down. So we did see seasonal differences, but the data goes from the baseline from when we started to the end of the project.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, this is a timeline as far as the irrigation goes, and a little bit, kind of like the journey we took. We started in June 22. That's when we take our baseline sampling. And again, remember, the purpose of this whole thing was to improve soil health and reduce water. So in June 22, we started first application in July. By November, we were showing pretty good numbers. So we decided we're moving into cooler months. So let's test the waters a little bit and reduce by 15%. That proved to be successful. Now, it was only six. Well, we had a huge, if anybody remembers, 22, 23, we had massive rains. So I don't think it was, there was like a period from November to about, March or something. It was like, well, it's raining so much. So, I could have probably turned the irrigation off. In June of 23, we did our second compost application. We took readings in August of 23, and the readings were really, really good at that time after our sampling was done. And I got a little cocky and said, let's go to 30% because I really want to get there. And that proved to be a massive disaster because we had a crash by October. Our biology in the treatment areas really took a nosedive. Probably not a good idea to reduce water by 30% right smack in the middle of summer. And if you're from Southern California, the hottest months are September and October. So we had kind of a dive. Now, I almost gave up at that point, and Brian and Jason said, no. That's the way we learn, right? Is testing the boundaries, pushing the envelope a little bit. So it was at this point, and maybe this is, an encouragement to you all. When you're not doing so good, you just kind of have to regroup. And it was at this time, I flew down Brian, I think, and I said, we need to kind of, from 22 to about this time here, we were kind of flying on the seat of our pants, just kind of, let's put the compost down, let's put the extract down. There wasn't really like any standard operating procedures or, measuring, precisely how we're going to age the compost. Brian came down and was the savior, and we regrouped. By June of 24, we were, we successfully back up to a 20% reduction. And the biology bounced back greatly after we changed up our processes.
And I think, the key takeaway from this really is, it was we started pushing that envelope. The microbiology, the community hadn't really fully established very well yet in the soil. So when we really started pushing the system and producing more and more water, that's when we saw that crash. It was like, you know what? It's just not, the structure hasn't been fully built there to be able to support that 30% reduction. So, as somebody said, we retooled, we made sure that the compost and the extracts we were making were the quality that we expected them to be. And when we did add some more water back to the system, the microbiology responded very well. I mean, it came back very, very quick. And then we said, all right, now we're able to make another reduction. And we went to 20% reduction. And really, it's that process of, as you're transforming property, you've got to pay attention to that. How far and how fast can you push, but you ought to make sure that you're maintaining that kind of growth in that microbial community. And I expect fully that we'll get to that 30%. In fact, we probably could at this point move to a 30% reduction. It's as you increase that the resiliency in that community, then that's when we can start applying the larger and larger reductions. And so This is a good thing. I mean, really, we wanted to know where our boundaries were at. And we found them. So
yeah, exactly. And to this day, we didn't go back up to 100%. We're still at 20%, really just to see how long we can take it. We haven't treated or put any more compost down. And we we tested about mid-January, I think, about a month ago. And
about 6 months after the study had ended, right?
Yeah, and the biology is outperforming in the treatment than the control still. And that's without any extra applications. So irrigation, like I said, 20% reduction. That we were tracking that. It's about 243,000 gallons of water saved to date. That was through July. We haven't tracked it, through the fall and winter here. 88% of that was in the turf, which is just a testament to how, turf grass is just really, really, really thirsty. But there's such an opportunity for saving water if we treat it the right way. And again, this is 4 irrigation valves. I've got about 1,500 valves or more across my portfolio. So if we can imagine, if we can actually scale this thing up, there's some serious water to be saved out there if we're doing the right management practices.
And it just shows you as well how much water is used in landscaping. And and that's the people are like, well, why don't you just not landscape? Well, landscapes are not just aesthetic as well. They actually provide a living ecosystem.
Yep.
They help clean the air. They help provide shade and cooling. So landscapes are really, really important, but we definitely want to make them so they're much more sustainable. So
yeah, they help us breathe too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, plant vigor and aesthetics. Like we said, this is where we couldn't do any data, but we could note that there was no plant mortality. We didn't lose any plants, even through the 30%. The only reason we went back, we dropped it back from the 30% reduction was because the biology was starting to crash. No plants crashed, no tree losses, no ground cover. The only plants we lost was because somebody walked through it and crushed some plants or something like that, which, that happens. There was some improvement of vigor in some of the species with in the treatment compared to the control, even with the 20% reduction. On your left is the control and on your right is the treatment. About the same. I don't know when this was taken. This is a closer shot of our it's mostly kikuyu and fescue turf. We got about 1.5 to 2 inches higher of growth. On the right is our treatment, and on the left is the control. This was taken on the same exact day. Kind of the more stark difference that we saw was in our palm treatment area versus the palm control. On the left, the control here, the caliandra vine that goes up the palm trunk here, noticeably on all of the caliandras were kind of like seasonally, especially in the colder months, didn't do so well. The shot on the right is the same exact day. They thrived the whole time. And to, just to note, you can see at the bottom of that caliandra, there's a Terusa, ground cover there. We could not get any compost on the bottom of that. So this treatment area was extract only.
Right.
And we had good results with that.
And it's amazing. Like there's some species that really kind of show more their stresses and their vigor. And the caliandra vines were for sure. That was a very visible thing. The camphor as well, I think, showed some of that, which I think is one of your pictures coming up.
Yeah. Here's that back ligustrum hedge, basically stayed the same. This is the camphor here. The one on the right is our treatment area. Again, that's the one right in the middle of the parking lot. The one on the left also is in a parking lot as well. That control on the left. Kind of a far away shot here. So the site held up. I mean, I did not notice any, throughout the whole thing, Brian and Jason kept asking me, how does the site look? How does the site look? I drive by, take some pictures. Really, at the beginning of the project, I told them this is going to be like the most unsexy project. It's going to be, well, how does it look? Are your trees more vibrant and everything? No, it's like a win would be status quo. Looks good, growing, healthy, and green, but using much less water. So as a summary, plant vigor pretty much stayed the same. The aesthetics, a little bit better in the treatment. Soil nutrition and plant nutrition stayed the same. We had a little bit of a dive in soil carbon and water holding capacity and control marginally. Treatment stayed the same. Irrigation was reduced, like we said, in treatment. Fungal to bacterial ratios up, and microbial and protozoa both up.
Yeah, and that was the kind of the cool aspect about this too, is just, it also kind of proved a point that from a nutritional standpoint, The microbes are doing the work. They're doing the heavy lift. I mean, that's 2 years without adding any fertilizer to the equation, and they still look great. And in fact, I would say, Tony, if you probably started from 2 years before to 2 years after, and you just took those snapshots, you probably notice very little difference as
Yeah.
far as the aesthetics were concerned. But again, that's removing the fertilizers from the equation. And
Yep.
I think that's really, really promising. I think it goes to going to show that once we establish that microbial community, the nutrient cycling is going to occur. The plants are going to get that what they need.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about cost. Um, we we saved in fertilizer costs just north of $1,000 a year. Water savings equaled out to about 400 based on water district rates. Compost cost was about $1,700 per application, so that's times two. So that's pushing a little over $3,000. And the extract cost was the highest cost. Now we pushed the envelope. The idea here wasn't to have some kind of ROI, return on investment, where we do something once and then it saves us 1,250 times 8. So we're north of like $10,000 here. So costs were I know 2 years is not relatively short to some people, but it is in soil health. But it's important to be transparent about this as well.
Yeah, and I think this is worth kind of a discussion here because there's a couple things here that I think we need and we wanted to expose this because when you look at this, yeah, the trial, it did cost more, in fact, significantly more, by doing the extracts than just doing the fertilization aspect of it.
Yeah.
But you got to recognize that when you're doing a trial, we're not optimizing for efficiency. We're not, honing those things where we can make this much cheaper. And what like Tony said, we were really putting quite a bit of material out there. Could we reduced significantly the amount of extract and still came to the same conclusion? And the other thing too, again, you're in a 2 year snapshot here. Well, what happens when we amortize this over 10 years? And let's say we're not having to put fertilizer into that location because the microbes are doing the work. Now we've got our gains that are there. And this is some of the things that like Tony and I are looking at, which is for the future. How do we make it efficient now? How can we turn this into an operating procedure that can be repeatable, super efficient, and
Yeah.
really reduce the cost in making extracts?
Absolutely. Okay, so the key takeaway messages here are we did find that healthy soils retain and have the ability to conserve water, being thoughtful about it. We proved the point. It was a success. Healthy soils support and foster more resilient plants. We had no plant loss. That proved that. Quality compost and extracts provide a significant benefit to nutrition, organic matter, water holding capacity. And then the big surprise, for us was the amount of transference being an unexpected benefit. And really what that tells me is we kind of been beating our heads against the wall a little bit about how are we going to scale this up, because getting extract into large acres and acres of fields in my type of setting, we're not in agriculture. I can't just put it in, a farm or something like that. It's very, very costly, but we do know that if you start even small, those microbes are pretty resilient. And if you reduce those, pesticides and, things that harm it, it's going to get into your site the more that you're consistent with it.
Yeah, another point here, Tony, too, is, quality compost. I think that's something that should be highlighted is we were very specific about the quality and the type of compost that we're using. And in fact, we ended up pulling from multiple sources. There was a local large scale composter that Tony had actually started the relationship with, and then we went in and worked with them. And Keish and Casey were very involved in this as well, of improving their process or to make a more of a biological line. So we actually got pretty good compost from them, but then there was a vermicompost that we added into the equation. We did some aging the compost where we were really trying to improve those numbers before we actually use them. So again, compost is one of our primary tools. And so it's very important to make sure that we're working with something that's going to give us the inoculum that we're looking for.
Yep. Yep. Okay, almost done here. Moving forward, what did we, whatever we learned, and what if you learn something, and if you do if you're successful with a project, what are you going to do with it, right? So, here's my cheesy little slide here. I think it's really important, especially in my industry, that even if you're going to start small or medium or big, it's not about quick results. It's about just setting your trajectory and keep going. Even if it's just slightly up, in time, it's going to get better and better. So what are we going to do with that? What are we going to do with what we learned? Brian mentioned compost, and I definitely will give a shout out to the Catalyst Bioamendments folks, Keisha and Casey. We don't have good compost around here in Southern California. I spent a year trying to find it, and I even purchased some of their stuff, and it's fantastic. To ship it down from Northern California was just too much, but we partnered, like Brian said, with a local composter, and we used their compost as an inoculum to start what is now yards and yards and windrows of really great compost. So what we're going to do with that now that it's local here, if we dig a hole and we plant it, no matter how big or small, add the compost. We know that it's good. We're gonna change up our operating guidelines. I'm working with our construction development teams to get the architects to start speccing out this compost. Also, tree basins, so important. That middle picture is of an olive tree. The European olive trees are a staple in our portfolio, and they are just notoriously ridden with bacterial and fungal diseases. So hyper focus. That's kind of our next project. Me and Brian were on the phone like 2 hours ago saying, we got to get on this. We're going to start treating our specimen trees with compost and extracts. And then large applications. We do a lot of turf renovations. That's a perfect time to, the one time you actually do want to till is get that good compost in there when there's no plants on the ground. Extracts on the basins, like I said, using, even if it's with a bucket, if it's large or small, keep it going. Fungicide mitigation. I'd like to, for anybody out there that's replacing any large palm trees, we have, we deal with the fusarium fungal disease on our huge Canary Island palm trees. And it has been a standard in our industry that when this tree that's worth like $35,000 to replace, if it has fusarium, rip it out, inoculate the hole with an insecticide or a pesticide, and then plant it back. And a lot of like in the soil food web community, you're just making a sterile anaerobic environment, and that fusarium will come back and kill that $40,000 tree that you just replaced. So, I'd rather put down real good compost with extract before we do it.
Well, Tony, when you guys plant, sometimes it's not like one tree, it's 10 trees or 20 trees, right? The investments are huge, right?
Yeah, I'm about to do 60 trees, throughout a parking lot, and we'll make sure that we get the right stuff on there, and we'll have success for the long haul. And then another change that we're making, I'm given large budgets, throughout the year, which, we all deal with some type of budget level. We decided that, I told my uppers that 5% of that's going to go towards soil health initiatives. So if I'm given $100, I'm going to put $5 towards compost in there. Or if it's 100,000, $5,000 worth of compost extracts and compost. It's that important. And again, projects are the best way, to get that biology in the ground. When it's existing, like we did at Alton Retail, that's when it's more difficult. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then this is my last slide. Working together, I'm encouraged to know that you're all out there. My efforts have for a long time. It's been quite honestly kind of lonely. I had a lot of pushback, which I'm sure you guys have too. You get a lot of that's a theory, or that's a pipe dream, or you're just an environmentalist or whatever. But it's not. I mean, this is real. It's science. It's the way that it was intended to be before we invented NPK in a bucket, or whatever. So working together is super important. And I'm hoping out of our efforts, meeting Brian and Keisha, Casey, and Raleigh, and all of you guys, we can work together and just put our minds together to work towards the future.
Well, and one thing too, I'm gonna toot Tony's horn here for a second, which is, he has a bunch of his colleagues in different companies, so this is, landscape professionals that are out there, and Tony's really, he hosted a seminar down there, invited a lot of the people from, other companies to come in, and is setting up a kind of a local group so that you guys can actually talk about these things. And these are going to be people that have the ability to really drive significant change in, the landscaping industry in Southern California. And Tony, that to me, that's just the right approach. I mean, it's the community of you guys getting together, talking about common problems and solutions that you guys come up with. That's going to basically help everybody be able to do the work down there. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I think community is just so important in that aspect.
it is. Yeah, yeah. We're already talking. Disney wants to work with us and collaborate. The city of Irvine, the UC Extension program. There's a couple of local colleges that are interested in it. So those are the type of organizations that, if you guys know, just like I do, you got to really want to. You're going to fail, and if you're going to fail fast, and then you just adjust and keep going. So, but thank you guys for having me. I'm really appreciative of you guys taking the time to listen.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tony.
Tony.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Tony.
And yeah, this is such a huge field in for people wanting to work in biology and wondering like, oh yeah, how do you make money in a biological field? Like the services of landscaping is enormous. Like that's the way people like Todd Harrington actually have been able to work for decades is with lawn care, landscaping. This is one of the most enormous crops in the entire United States by the amount of money and investment that goes into it. And so if you change that little bit, if you're converting people from fertilizers and pesticides to biology within this field, you're making an enormous impact, like enormous. So we're going to get to questions in a bit, but before I do that, let me share you guys a little bit about what we're doing here with the Compost Academy. So let me bring that up in the background here. Sorry, buddy. There we go. Oh, it's so smooth. Now it's not smooth. All right, anyway, so if you've already seen this presentation, like this pitch I'm due like a bunch of times before, feel free, get some water, take a bathroom break. But I'm only going to be here a few minutes. This is for new folks who want to dive in deeper. So, well, this presentation, it's part of this training for soil biology is what we're launching and part of organization called the Compost Academy. So this is really about in-depth training and coaching so that you can learn how to really restore soils and get a better understanding of compost and soil biology. So, if you're inspired direction, what do I do next? Well, we offer as a program that really helps you understand soil biology and start a really practical training journey. And we want to help you train about how to make compost, how to restore soil biology until you feel competent and confident until you feel like, yeah, I really know how to improve soil biology. And what is it about? What's kind of what you're getting here? So the Compost Academy, what we're trying to create is a basis of camaraderie, where you're part of a group of really motivated people who are making compost, learning about extracts, learning how to improve their soil biology, and we're going to coach you to actually do the steps so you can do these things. So you can apply the extract, you can apply the compost, you can actually go out in the world and do this. We want to help you feel confident competent so that you can do this again and again so you can consistently get results. And to help you do this, we're going to have actions, challenges, and experience-based practical learning to help you actually take the steps to have biological results to make the compost until you're not just, getting over the threshold of failure. So to do that, there's a lot of challenges to help you get there. And there's also going to be learning that works for your needs. There's self-paced videos that for people who don't have the time to do a lot of group coaching can do it on their own pace. And you can follow along with Keisha, Casey, Brian, and the rest of everybody in the group and take these week by week. And another thing we want to help establish is professional networks. So we want to help people who have services reach out to each other and people who have work find that. So what we're going to be able to learn about, you're going to learn about a wide spectrum of composting techniques. You're going to learn about extracts and compost teas, brewing, application, scaling. You're going to a little bit about microscopy, though that's going to come at a later date. We're going to be learning a lot more about replacing expensive and toxic inputs with biological compost, kind of like we learned here, to replace those pesticides, fertilizers, herbicides, fungicides with just biology. You're going to have expanded case studies for farms, landscapers, growers, and composters. We're going to learn about so many cases like restoring degraded soils with compost, degraded ecosystems with soil biology and compost. You're going to learn about practical soil biology. So even though we love the theory, we're gonna go beyond that so you can get a really good practical understanding instead of just being stuck in an expanded theory for hundreds of hours. Um, we're going to talk about composting and soil testing on different scales from a small scale and how you move that up to the large scale. And here's a bit about the format. So we have self-paced video lessons, we have group coaching and training, we've got an online and in-person community, we've got a microbe library, we've got an accountability program where I'll poke you until you do the actions that you want to do. We're going to have action challenges that we're going to do week by week. And you're going to have first access and discounts to future retreats and workshops. And you're going to have access to advanced intensives that come up in the future, like large-scale composting. And if you want to get in on this is a really great time because programs like this right now existing, they cost thousands of dollars, up to 5,000. And right now, as part of what we're offering the Pioneer program, is you're getting $1,000 discount to a future program we're going to launch with the Compost Academy, and you're getting a free lifetime access to self-paced trainings and workshops. You're getting first access to group coaching. It's going to start March 6th, and you get discounts and first access to the live Compost Academy. So we're launching this right now with just $900, and in the future when we do that, it's going to raise to at least 2,000. So you're getting this really great opportunity now. That's going to save you a lot of money in the long run if you really want to dive deep into training for soil biology and compost. And if you want to take advantage of this, I'll put the link in the chat, but you can sign up right now at compost.academy. And we've got a bonus session coming up next week. We're going to ask everybody to help decide the topic, and our very first session is March 6th. So I hope to have you guys join us, and we'll send you a link down there in the chat. All right, well, why don't we get to Q&A here? Because, man, there's some really, really great questions. I see some folks who are already part of the Academy here, Cheryl and Mark, Bruce. So why don't we get to a few of their questions first, and then we'll dive into everybody else's. All right. Well, here's an easy one. Probably a
I think
very straightforward question from Mark. How much extract was applied?
so. Tony, we applied quarterly, and it was 250 gallons of extract across the 4 treatment areas. My recollection is correct there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We
So,
we did we brewed about 220 gallons at a time, right?
yep. Mhm.
Wait.
Yeah, we did 220 gallons at a time, and we did 2 batches of those. So it was really 440 gallons per quarter. So if you times it all across, that would be times 8.
Mm.
So about 3,200 gallons, roughly. Let's say 3,300 gallons of extract were applied over the 2-year period of time frame on that
Um,
location.
Actually, I think Brian, we brewed 220. Is that what?
Oh, that's right. We did the dilution till we got to the 400.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we actually we used a third of that. So there were actually about 750 gallons.
Yeah,
Right.
of
But it was
diluted. It was
massively.
220 gallons of what we consider to be more concentrated. But this is a good point to talk about. You know, when you look at extract, I mean, typically we will dilute it so that we have a volume of water to be able to help penetrate down into the root zone. It comes down to, the compost. So when we really use the amount of compost per application cycle, it was roughly right around 40 pounds of compost. So that's probably an easier way for people to kind of, internalize how much compost do we use to make extracts and be able to put on once per quarter. So it was about 40 pounds of compost per quarter that we use to make the extracts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
And
also
then,
some questions, and I'm curious, Brian, when you guys were looking at the extract, um, What were like the fungal numbers? What did nematodes look like? Did you see protozoa? Could you describe that a little bit?
For sure. Yeah. So we definitely did see all the above. So nematodes were present. We saw definitely plenty of protozoa and fungal numbers. Although, if you're the people that follow the Soil Food Web School, there's a term they call biocomplete extract, which has a minimum of 135 micrograms per gram of bacteria and 135 micrograms per gram of fungi. We did not make that. And that's kind of in my practices, we typically don't tend to make what we call biocomplete extract because it takes a lot of extracting to get to that process.
Yeah.
Our quality of the compost extract was essentially about a tenth of that. And that's what we made up. So if you want to mathematically figure that out, it would say probably take that 220, divide it by 10, and it would be 22 gallons of biocomplete extract, which is being applied across that entire property. And
Mhm.
so small numbers. I mean, that's not a lot, and it doesn't take a lot of those organisms. Once you have a good diversity of those organisms and you get them into the ground, those plants are going to start fostering these relationships, and that's where we see that building occurring. So it's not like you have to use a tremendous amount. So we took, let's say, that 22 gallons of biocomplete extract, and then we made it 750 gallons in total, just so we
Yeah.
had enough water to be able to penetrate down into the ground.
That's what's impressive to me is like I've had a lot of time looking at that compost and I know like when you look at it visibly, it looks like the compost we make. It's like chocolate cake. It's very broken down. When you put it under the microscope, everybody's home, but it's not near the numbers that we strive to achieve. And then, when you put it into extract and then you dilute it more, this just shows that, these marks that we try to hit at Catalyst, like that bar is it's maybe set a little bit too high because when you're looking at the compost that was produced there, it's produced at super scale, which means they're using materials not indiscriminately, but they're not pristine like ours are. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to this project that I find to be really exciting just
Mm.
because, well, one, like it might turn the large scale producers on to actually large landscapers like you, Tony, like that's money for them. That's a client for them. And that's a really good reason for them to start converting these small portions of their compost lot over to biofocused. And that's exactly what's going on Darren's lot is it's a teeny little place is scraped off for microbes. But
Yeah.
if this kind of data keeps coming out, if we can continue these experiments, which we hope you do, can you imagine?
We're
Well,
gonna keep going.
and to be honest with you, it was Tony's voice, that was able to convince somebody like Darren. Darren is a large scale composter down in Southern California, makes, I mean, at large scale. And Tony working with Darren said, "Hey, look, we want to make something that's more biological." Darren's like, "Great, let's do it." And that's when we brought in, your the Catalyst biomimic compost to inoculate his compost pile, so we can kind of get that ball rolling, that process started. And it's companies like Tony's the Irvine company that has a lot of say and power, and be able to go to the people that make these products and say, "This is what we require. This is what we want." And that's helping us make that change at a larger scale. So
Yeah.
That's real quick,
great.
guys. I know Rainier's coming in from South Africa. I know it's super late there, so maybe get his question there for you. One, so does the irrigation water get treated with humic acid to lock up chlorine, assuming that some municipal water is used for regular irrigation?
The answer is when we are fertilizing through our fertigation tanks, we do put humic acid in. Now that's on my properties. Um, and we do that across the portfolio, but we did not do that on this testing because we stayed away from the fertilizer.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we weren't introducing any kind of fertilization aspect into this, and knowing that we were probably going to take a small hit from the chlorine standpoint, but us adding those extracts and Tony adding the compost and the mulching, there's a lot of humics in there that helped us bind up the chlorine. There was probably impact. There's no doubt about that. But I would say that the impact, I mean, really just looking at the testing, was negligible because we were able to overcome whatever kind of setback the chlorine would give to us, so that we could actually get the microbes established, which we did see. We
Yeah.
definitely saw the microbes change significantly from the beginning to the end of the project.
Yep.
All right.
Could we speak a little bit about like the idea of proof and the study and this whole idea of somebody was bringing up about like transference. haven't, I mean, have we like necessarily proved that transference is why that happened? Like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But transference is proven. I've seen it, time and time again with the sterile pipette and, a nematode extraction like, could we talk a little bit just about, the idea of these studies and like, this isn't a lab. Like Tony's up against a lot and Brian when developing this because they're trying to take a scientific study and move it into the real world where there's humans moving and weather conditions. There were so many comments about, was it north, south, east, west? Could this be a temperature thing?
Mhm.
And I'm just curious, like I'm sure you struggled with this the whole time. Do you want to speak about it just a little bit?
Sure. Tony, me or you? You want me to jump in
I'll,
first? You?
I'll say something really quick.
Yeah.
I mean, the there was I mean, I don't think there was any really like climatic or weather or soil or sun changes really between like each of them. The big one is that turf area, the control turf with the treatment turf. This is an area that, I mean, it has been treated with fertilizers, like the areas inside, like the palms and the camphors and all that stuff, I've been organically fertilizer, but that turf on the outside is managed by another group. And I know for a fact that they've been doing like synthetic fertilizers. There is no reason why that control turf should have been, it's across like, there's like a driveway. I mean, you have to like go across it. And so we're literally like beating our heads. How is the fungal numbers going up on this one? And every week there's a large lawnmower that goes right across it.
Right.
I mean, they're really, unless, I mean, seriously, like every single week they mow the lawn because it's got to look really nice. Landscapers' boots are walking along and weeding it along the side and stuff. They go right from, and I watched them. They go right from their, because we're kind of close to the corner was our treatment area. Lawnmowers would go, do a few passes, whatever, and then go right across the driveway and go right onto the control. So, I mean, I don't know. You tell me. Common sense comes into play, and I would say the transference is pretty dang
On
real.
the other side of that, actually, I have some clients with lawn, well, one client in particular that we were having such a hard time with. It was like the lawn would look great, and then boom, like pathogens again. And it was the lawnmower blade. They were taking it to other places, and when we started cleaning it, it stopped.
Yeah.
Really?
Clean the blade though, which is like a total like
Absurd.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we started to see, the levels of the control going up and it's some proportionality to the treatment, that's when the whole transference thing kind of came in. But we never designed the trial with transference in mind, and nor to set out to prove that transference was occurring. We're making an assumption, an educated one, that's transference is what really is caused this growth on the control side of the house. And it could be other factors too, like we stopped fertilizing again on the control as well. So maybe there's some impact fertilizers we're having to the microbial community, so that allowed for them to be able to grow. But the DNA analysis was one of the key things, because we knew from the beginning that it was lacking in a number of organisms. Once we started doing our treatment, we brought in organisms that were identified in the DNA analysis. Those same organisms were then also found in the control. So it's like, okay, if they both weren't there when we started the project and we started treating with those organisms, and now those organisms end up making it over into the control side of the house, there's a lot of proof points in there saying, okay, that's probably what's occurring. And Tony and I talked about this, in future design of a trial, should we have picked maybe 2 locations, 2 properties? And then 2 properties that have 2 different management companies, so that the people who are lawn mowing aren't doing that transference kind of thing. We could do that, but
Can you
that
define
wasn't.
transference really quick?
Sure. Transference just means that the biology is migrating. It's being transferred from one location to another location, and what we suspect the reasons for this is there's a lot of different reasons that we think of. One is the human impact. People walking across it, the landscapers that are managing the properties are in and out of those locations. But then there's also, there are birds, there's insects, there's a lot of other organisms that live in that environment that are moving those organisms around.
Even the
So
wind, right? The
Yeah.
wind,
sure,
right? You've seen like a dust devil swirling soil in the air. It
sure,
could be picking all this stuff up and just setting it right there on the other side of the
right.
lot. There's so many ways that these things move.
Yep. Also, I will say really quick, for years, it's been required by our tree trimming contractors that prune our big palm trees to, we require them to, when they cut a tree, when they're pruning the fronds, because of fusarium transferring, right? For decades, we require them to either use a unique blade per tree or dip your blade into bleach, right? So if we know that transference happens on bad organisms, why wouldn't they happen on good? So
All
Yes,
right,
for sure.
exactly.
Oh man,
Perfect.
so many good questions here. I see if you guys see anything, there's a lot for like Cheryl has probably 10, what, 6 questions here. I'll let you guys pick one or two that really speak to you. These,
Uh,
well, I see here's about one about how about the first one's about invasives and second one's about maintenance. So the
Invasive.
first one is
There was a few questions about invasives. That's a good one.
okay, cool. So Cheryl's asking, do you have any issues with invasives on your properties? What steps do you take to handle invasives? Do you recycle or remove any of these invasives in composting? I like that point. Do you recycle or use any of these invasives in the composting?
Just to clarify, I think when we're talking about invasives, we're talking about invasive plant species.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Tony, weeds. I mean, I know when I ever went to the site, there was really, really little or no weeds present. And I think that's a lot to do with your mulching. But how do you guys do with the weeds? What's your kind of your practice?
um, well, everything that we take off site gets composted, it's typically into mulch. I don't know what percentage goes into an actual compost or a mulch. Everything does get taken off site. Like you said, Brian, we don't deal with a lot of weeds because we have such a large coverage. It's if there's bare soil, we're putting mulch down, and if there's no mulch, there's plant material, right? But like I had in one of those slides, we used to spray a lot of Roundup. I mean that was the way to spray it because it translocates down to the roots and stuff. Completely eliminated that. So we're either physically removing by hand or using an organic like citrus-based herbicide. That's just a burn method, which won't harm the soil. Invasives in the turf is probably the hardest one because you can't burn because you're going to burn your good stuff. So I don't have a lot of time. Probably like 5 acres of turf out of the 203 I deal with, and I'm happy to have some invasives like Bermuda grass or kikuyu because it's most of the time green. But if I have to get rid of it, we're going to take sections out and reseed as much as we can. Stay away from systemic synthetic pesticides.
And just to clarify, because I think this might be part of the question, which we're not making compost. So Tony and his team, they're not making compost. We're sourcing compost. And so, and hopefully we get more of these closed loop kind of things, which is the materials that we're pulling off are going to facilities that are composting material that are making really good compost that we then turn around and use back into our facilities. That is broken in most of in any kind of municipality systems that are out there in landscaping in general. And so we're hoping that with some of these large scale composters, they start incorporating this, and we can get more of that kind of closed loop aspect happening.
On the side of the compost thing, someone was asking how thickly was that compost applied? Was it just raked over the grass? It looked pretty thin to me, but I couldn't tell.
The way we did the compost on the grass was we aerated before. And so we aerated, raked away all the plugs, and then we basically put down the compost and just kind of like kept raking it in until, because we couldn't really have like a thick layer on that grass. It would look bad, obviously. And then water it in immediately. On the shrubs, it was about a 2-inch layer.
2-inch layer.
Is that 2 inches of compost and mulch, or is it 2 inches
Yes.
of compost?
Oh, no, that would be 3 inches, about an inch of compost, 2 inches of mulch.
Yeah. which is a great standard practice. I love to have that compost layer from the soil, bare soil, to compost to mulch on top. The mulch provides great protection to the
Yeah.
organisms of the compost, and it gets the compost working, or the organisms of the compost working right away.
Did you guys mention already? I think you did, but the cost comparison, it was more expensive to do microbial focused, right?
For sure. The neighborhood of right around 10 times more expensive. But that was the point I was trying to make is it's a trial. You have to expect when you do these things like in a trial, you're not focused on efficiencies. It is simply how can I get the micro, I mean, so expensive labor and we're not optimizing on our tools and those kind of things. It's after you get done with the trial, it's like, okay, now how am I going to roll this out large scale? And this is kind of the conversations Tony and I are going to have in the future, which is how do we reduce that cost so it becomes much, much more cost effective to be able to do this work. And the second thing too is we were looking at from a fertilization cost to the applying extract cost. At some point we're seeing 6 months have gone by since the study ended and the biology is maintaining, if not increasing. In a lot of cases it is increasing, which means that we are probably still in the paradigm of we don't need to apply any of these fertilizers and for the long haul. So now you amortize those costs over many, many, many years, and then that flips the script. Then that's when you start seeing your cost savings.
Yeah.
But we wanted to make sure we showed that because it's not like, it's a lot of times you do a trial, it's not like, wow, that was so much cheaper. No, the trials can be more expensive. But then the whole goal is to make it cheaper in the long haul.
Also, the intangible, Keisha, just really quick, is the idea here was to make plants more resilient. So there's a potential for a large cost savings because we don't want it to be like we're going through with turf right now. Well, you have to remove your turf because it uses too much water. Well, what if they say, well, you can't have you have to remove, you either have to remove, 50% of your water or half of your landscape or something. So that's what we're trying to, maybe it'll never happen. That would be fantastic. Then we'll just have really great soils.
It's a bigger picture thing. I mean, I see it too in our, just in the way that they're treating the fire reality. It's like, we're headed towards having to get rid of our plants. So that's incredible work, actually. Bruce had a question too. I think it's a really good one. Can you describe more in detail the biological testing used in your trial to monitor and how well your interventions were working? So as I read that, how are you deciding what you're going to do based off the biology test? Is it just watching a rise and crash, or are you following all those other data points as well?
Go ahead.
I was really focused on the biology. Yeah, I mean, we did crazy. If you want to spend a lot of money, go get a DNA soil sample. Holy crap! I mean, I did that because we wanted to see the actual species. And if you want to fall asleep, read the names of bacterial species. Say them out loud. So my main focus was F to B ratio. That was the real driver here. We've got pine trees and conifers and palm trees and stuff. So and most of our plant material is shrubs. So we really wanted to kick that F to B ratio up. I know we're supposed to be at 10-1 or something. I'm not even close, but we started off at 0.4 or something. We're all the way upwards to 2 now. So that was the driver. But as those went up, we started kind of backing off water a little bit.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and we did, to Tony's point, we for sure the microbial assessments were a key thing for us because they tended to, I think, just show things more quickly as far as the changes that were occurring. In fact, when we would take samples 10 days after a treatment, then we would get together, both Tony and I and another scientist that Tony and I to do the DNA and all the carbon sequestration and those kind of studies. We get together and we look at the data and say, what is this telling us? And so we wanted to understand. And that's when we saw that, hey, all right, let's make the decision to push it to 30% water reduction. So we did. And then it was pretty quickly the microbial community said, whoa, okay, this was not good for us. This was too much water reduction too soon. And we were able to course correct before we saw any kind of problems in the plants. I mean, the plants looked fantastic, but the microbial community was crashing. And we understood variables and seasonality. we knew we were getting to the summer time frame, which should be a move down, but this was a move down. Like wow, okay, the organisms are not happy at this point. But the
Mhm.
minute that we made the change and we put the water back into the situation, the microbial community, you know, recovered and
Yeah.
then started growing again and started pushing. So it was used that kind of taking data on a regular basis and doing that analysis real time to say how do we want to potentially course correct, and it worked. It worked great, to be honest with you. We knew what the boundaries were at that point. We were able to push a boundary too far, too fast, back off, and then we could then start pushing it a little bit slower, and that's how we were able to achieve those gains.
I think
Yes,
it's
and
interesting how hard it is to tell all the parts of the story. I'm just like, I just hear you like, you looked at carbon sequestration as well. I'm looking down. There's someone in the group, Mark, who he had a few different concerns that I want to hit on, but one of his was, why aren't you concerned with carbon capture? He says increasingly landscapers are concerned with water and water capture. And it's like, when you're looking at the microbial reality, and I mean, pardon me if I'm wrong, because carbon sequestration isn't my wheelhouse, but when I think about carbon, like when we're increasing the microbial reality, especially fungi in the soil, right? And we're creating this giant soil sponge, like we're not just tackling water retention, although that was your goal, Tony.
Mhm.
There's a lot more going on here, like carbon sequestration, right? Like there's so many different benefits that are happening that we can't necessarily dive into in this 1 hour, but you guys looked at many different data points. That's really exciting. Could you say anything about the carbon?
Uh, Joni, you want to, or do you want to?
I will say that we did track that, and it was something that we would have hoped would have been more of an outlier, but it kind of stayed the same. I think we kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit with backing off the water, because it was up and down in the, to the organisms that are actually capturing it, bacteria and fungi. It is very important. In fact, I agree with that question. We should be sequestering more carbon, and I'm sure the benefits go much more beyond my brain's capacity to understand it. But go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was gonna say, and Jason, the other soil scientist that we had, in the equation here, who was really focused on carbon, one of the comments that he made to us was like, there was a minimal amount of differences between them, but somewhat negligible. But his impression or assumption was that we were going to start seeing more and more carbon gains as we went through, and that separation would start to show for the longer haul. But the time frame that we were doing the study was just a little bit too small of a time frame to really kind of see that big separation that was there.
Yeah.
And the same thing too, we looked at the water stable aggregates in the soil, so we saw some differences that were there as well. And I think that's just, Tony mentioned, we're not where we want to be. I mean, there was a long road to get to where we think we would get to a very resilient, super stable soil. It's just we've made big gains there, but we still have a long ways to go to be able to kind of get what we consider to be a very, very healthy soil microbiome.
so many good questions here. Here's one, I guess, pretty quick from Domingo. Tony, you mentioned testing for respiration. Can you provide any results?
We have it, but yeah, we didn't put it as part of the presentation. But yeah, we did soil respiration studies there as well, and we did see separation minimally there. But that was part of I think the challenge is that in that respiration, we were seeing the microbes establishing in the control side of the house. So that was adding to that soil respiration. It was like, okay, the treatment, I mean, if you were to take a look from the beginning to end, yeah, differences. But if you look between the test and the control, not a lot of differences. And that a lot, I think in this case was because the control was really adding the microbiology community into the equation. So
Yeah. I wish I had that info up. That was one I just kind of was like, it's, we're not seeing much growth here. So I wish I could
right.
speak more to that. My
My
apologies.
kind of guy excited about the microbes. It's
Yeah,
needed.
Yeah.
I'd probably do the same.
I got a good question here. Did anybody notice a difference, like patrons, like at the
Oh, like the owners of the store and things like
Yeah,
there
like
all the time. Have you had any feedback, Tony?
We did get feedback when we were doing, when we were collecting soil samples is when we got the most attention. People were like, "What are you doing? Oh my gosh, that's crazy!" It's like, okay, but nobody really notice like visually or anything like that. We don't get a lot of feedback from that.
Oh, you probably only get feedback when it's really negative. I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like those plants are dead. It's
Uh-huh.
looking like crap. Got to come take them out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
everybody
you're-
looks
All the
kind of.
pictures, they were like basically shrubs. It wasn't like it was that, like like a
Yeah.
breathtaking landscape. It was
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
typical. It's
Well, you
cool
go
that
to
you
some
take it
other
in.
Tony's properties. He said they're blinged out. That is for sure. I mean, there's some of those properties that have some showpiece, plants in there that are very expressive and looking in that
Yeah.
sense. But Alton Retail was not that. That is your pretty much pedestrian, run of the
Yeah.
mill corner lot
Yeah.
kind of aspect.
I will say this: when you're spraying like a compost tea, be careful because people think that's a bad pesticide.
Totally, yeah,
You
yeah,
should be wearing like a shirt that says "This is healthy stuff."
yeah, yeah. Microbe guys.
Yeah.
I think this is a good opportunity. If we want to have anybody ask their question live, raise your hand and we can unmute you real quick. It's really awesome hearing your voice and not just doing a
Mhm.
little text box here. So if anyone has a question,
While we wait
raise
for
your
someone to
hand.
raise their hand, Domingo asked, "How do you evaluate the aesthetics?"
Yeah,
For sure.
that's the tough one. That is the tough one.
Uh, the real answer is we're constantly walking the properties all the time and making sure it's clean. But the real answer is I get calls all the time like, "Hey, that looks bad," or "There's a weed here." So it's the complaints.
Right. And lack of complaints usually means, hey, I'm probably doing the right job.
Imagining it's like the truth that someone's just sleeping blissed out with a burrito like on the lawn. It's like pass the test.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and that's something about the aesthetics too, is, people like Tony and the landscapers that are working there who are working with those plants all the time. I'm sure, Tony, you have like a muscle memory, like your skills in observing differences in plants are going to be much higher tuned than the average person that just drives into the parking lot and then it's going to park their car and walk to a
Yeah.
store.
Yeah.
So there's probably a lot of that you rely upon yourself to say, hey, look, I've had 20 years of experience of looking at these kind of plants. Those aren't looking so good. That's looking a little bit better, type of thing.
Yeah.
Brendan says, "Wait, but are you getting as many complaints on the property as before, or have they lessened?"
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Great question. I get less.
Nice. That was a good question.
Yeah.
So here's two questions about biochar use. So Joshua has a multi-part question, but Brad is also asking about biochar. Were you guys using biochar in any of this, or would you consider it in the future using any of that?
I haven't tested biochar myself. We didn't use it on this one, but I've heard great things. Yeah, I mean, I've heard it has great water holding capacity. I just haven't really dove into it yet.
Yeah, wasn't part of this study, but something that we may look at long haul, which is especially in the planting part of it. Especially if you can incorporate biochar in during the planting phase, that's probably we're looking at it. And my experience with biochar, anything above 10% is probably not necessary. In that 5 to 10% range, seem to be pretty good results. Again, biochar is just another tool that we can use from our toolbox. And there's consideration though, it's not all biochar created equal. You want to make sure you charge your biochar. So there's things you need to do to be able to make sure you can use it effectively.
Cool. So here's a question about so during the wet season, Mark was asking, it's like, all right, Northern Hemisphere, winter is the wet season. How do you guys change your approach during when it's really wet during the wet season? Like how did that change the trial or the factors there?
In this project, when we did have that wet season, we had to adjust a lot. Actually, I couldn't put down really any extract at all. I mean, it would have been kind of a waste of time. There was actually a lot of compaction that happened. Rain compacts a lot, and it even affected our soil collecting process. I remember we went out at like a day after a heavy rain, and it was basically a throwaway because it was just a bunch of clay.
Yeah, it was so saturated,
Yep.
with material.
Yep.
But and I think I saw a question there around, the controllers. Well, how do you adjust, the controllers during the wet seasons? Well, that's kind of the smart controller aspect of it, which is it's already accounting for, hey, we've got rain, precipitation, all that. So it reduces the amount of water is delivering based upon those kind of conditions. So
Yeah.
in those rainy, wet seasons, it's not like it's a just we reduce 15%, but it's 15% off of what's already being reduced because the smart controller is reducing the amount of water.
Yeah.
And then during the summertime frame, when it's hot and dry, it increases the amount of water. So the delivery is definitely different between winter and summer, but the smart controllers are amazing at that.
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, I've used my own irrigation controllers and so forth, and I have to manually go in there and say, oh, it's getting rainy and that type of thing. And I have to go and plug it in and do my changes. Having a smart controller is just fire and forget, which is kind of nice. And it reports back to you all the data, which is even fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, all right, one last thing. Anybody raise your hand. Let's get a live voice here. Come on. I know some of you folks are shy, but we want to hear a voice. We
Yeah.
want to hear one because we might not go for too much longer. We've been going for about
Hour and a half.
hour and a half
Hour and a
here, and
half.
we might
Yep.
be on maybe probably another 5 to 10 minutes, kind of depending on the
Mhm.
response. There we go. Brendan McNamara. Can see Brendan. All right, I'm gonna let you talk here. Good to hear your voice. Hey, Brendan.
Hey guys, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the work you're doing and the invite to this. This is my first of your webinars, but I hope for many more. Just amazing work, and I'm glad to have one more um, example to refer to. A lot of people think this is hippie stuff for people out on farms, but these are some of the most high value properties in the country. And it's just amazing. It gives me goosebumps. I wondered if any of you have heard of folks like Walter Jen, Dee Dee Pershouse, Zach Weiss. Zach was, when you mentioned the fires and the really unfortunate and indicative reaction that people have is like, oh, we need less foliage, when actually you can sequester so much water in the soil that basically it's a big wet sponge. And Zach, after the fires, was talking about people that he's worked with, where fires just basically raged around the property but didn't come onto the property. And that it was a huge factor. And that there's so have you thought about incorporating any kind of water features or more rainwater sequestration, more rainwater harvesting kind of elements as a something to move forward with this, in addition to the biotic factors that you're playing with?
I
Kind of had I threw a bunch of stuff there.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's great. No.
It's all
I
good
was wondering
stuff,
who's going to
though.
jump first.
personally with the Irvine company, I haven't been involved in those type of talks. I'd be interested to ask some of the people on much larger offices than mine that maybe are implementing those, because we have a whole division that operates some farmland and some of the open spaces that have burned in the past. So interesting question. I wish I had specifics for you, but it's worth a deep dive.
I will say that, yeah, yes, very much. Raleigh is actually deeply connected with Zach Weiss. He's part of it's Water Stories is the
It
name
is
of that
called
company.
Water
We will
Stories.
certainly have Zach Weiss
I
on
figured.
someday.
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah,
we
well,
do, when we're talking about working in Southern California and with Casey and I's work on landscape transformation and ecosystem regeneration, the water, like shaping the land is the first thing we do. Before we ever bring in microbes, before we ever think about compost, we are shaping the land. I can see why Tony's working in these small areas where just so many people are walking back and forth. So large divots in the ground and temporary seasonal ponds aren't always easy to build into those kind of landscapes. But Dee Dee Pershouse as well. Be great to have Dee Dee on here. I was actually just in her group this morning, listening to some talks with her about fire resiliency in LA. So There's a lot of work being done in this, you guys, and it's like be like I saw someone in the comments saying, I hope I'm not sharing too much, sharing all these different connections. But my goodness, if you know someone that's out there that's doing amazing work, Dee Dee Purshouse, Zach Weiss, John Liu, I mean, the names go on and on. Share this stuff in the group, share with each other, and check them out because everybody's got their thing going on, and everyone's got these presentations that you can join in on and just start to, build your tool list, like Brian said. There's
Mhm.
so many different ways we can go about this work, and there's so many different tools and options and projects to be done.
I mean, you guys could go on about like, I mean, all the cool stuff that just happened at the Plant Trees Festival using your compost to basically restart the biology after the burn there. And like your guys, what you did with your landscaping project, helping that like kind of barren hillside, reestablishing the biology and all the plants there. That's super cool. And that totally relates to fire remediation too. And we could talk about like, because they faced fire recently, right? Like how did they do during the recent fires?
The house lived. The
Their
house lived.
house lived. So,
It did.
bam.
We
I
can't say,
mean,
we can't say it's the
I mean,
micro
there's not a
there.
one-to-one,
We
but
had a
pretty
client
cool.
just on the other side that had received, microbial treatments and their house did not live. So there's
Oh,
no strong
yeah, fair enough.
conclusion to draw there. But um, yeah, anyway, it's probably for another webinar, the whole fire, water retention reality.
Yeah,
But
we got one we're trying to set with Peter Marshall. He had a farm in Australia that during these recent bushfires, and Zach talks about the time like fire was whipping around several times, came back and forth because he had so many ecological buffer areas with water, with healthy grasses that there was so much moisture in the soil that yeah, his property had so much buffers that it did not burn, even though just all his neighbors just got torched. So he's got a really cool story, and eventually we'll try to have him on. But yeah, having Didi on. We do have a free replay, so we'd send you about Walter Yenna. He's got some really cool stuff there. All right.
Just one last comment
Thanks,
I just like
Brendan.
to make around this, which is it's important for all of us, and that means the people here in the panel, plus all of you that are attending, that we help educate the people who are making decisions about what to do around, fire suppression and those kind of things. Our regulators are people who are trying to do their best, but they're not always informed with the right or the best information. So the more that we can do, like Tony's project, the more that we can visualize that and express that, the more the people that have the power to make significant changes for the good or for the worse, that they at least have the knowledge. And so,
Mhm.
write your legislators, try to talk to them.
Mhm.
Anybody who's in the regulatory agencies, if you're within, try to push from within and making changes because there are serious consequences if people make the wrong decisions. By saying we need less plants, that is a disaster. That's an ecological disaster of just saying of proportionality, right? You start to make a repeating chain of degradation in that landscape if you keep on removing the plants out of there. So it's
Yeah, you
important.
disrupt the water cycle, you disrupt the soil cycle, and if you have healthy green plants, then of course they're gonna be more resistant to fire.
Yep.
All right. Well, do you guys see any other awesome questions? I know we're right at the point where
I
I
have a
know.
practical question
Go for it.
for all of us. Um, Next week's topic hasn't been decided yet. We've thought like we're like let's just let you guys guess or vote on what you want to have as a topic. What would be cool for us is while you guys are here and you're in the chat, if you want to like, if any idea just comes to the top of your head, like I would like to see a webinar on this, like could you throw it in the chat for me? Because I'll go ahead and put that into an email and send it to people so that we could vote and get started on our presentation for
Next week.
next week, which
All
is only
right. See
Tuesday.
some good
Fire off,
ideas.
fire off those ideas, guys.
Yep.
And thanks again, Brendan. Really appreciate your questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Here we
All right. Well,
go.
we're waiting for that. Should we go through kind of our thank yous and let
Yeah,
people
yeah,
kind
let's do
of
that.
So I personally, I'd like thank Tony for agreeing to come on and sharing, the work that he's done. And I think, like Brendan made a comment about this, hearing people about the work they've done and successes and failures that they've had is tremendously important. And so
Mhm.
Tony, you agreeing to come on and share this, and fantastic, man. I can't thank you enough for doing that for us.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Tony.
absolutely, guys. Thank you so much. Seriously, it's great. It's good to be amongst people that care and want to do good.
Yep.
For soil
Awesome.
here, Tony.
Yep. Yep.
Well, everybody, there's so many things we mentioned. You mentioned the Irvine Company, you mentioned Compost Academy and Soil Matters and Catalyst Bioamendments. We'll send out all the links to these things in the replay. But appreciate everybody's time being here. There's so many more fantastic things to come. I hope to see you all in the Compost Academy if you choose to join. But we're going to keep having these awesome webinars coming up. Next one's going to be an exciting surprise and a side topic, but we're going to keep doing these for months and months to come. Thank you so much, Tony. It was really fantastic having you join.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Ciao, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Mhm.